Hi guys, thanks ever much for getting here together today. The podcast today is in relation to flexible employers. I think it's really important that we have a conversation around the value of working for a flexible employer, especially in the modern working place where people's lives are very different post-COVID. And I just want to sort of pick up on that subject really, and I've picked yourselves here within the group because we all have a flexible working pattern here at the Interquest Group. So just to start off with some introductions, I am the Global Director of Talent here for the Interquest Group. My role is to look after the strategy and the hiring for all hires across the group, which covers the whole of the UK, the US and Amsterdam. I've been within the group for nearly 8 years now, but in total I've been in recruitment for the best part of 25 years. So I'm based here at Cannon Green, and today I've got with me...
So I'm Lindsey Onoufriou. I'm the talent acquisition partner here within the group, so I recruit across all of our different brands, and I've been in recruitment again for about 22 years, I think it is, but a relatively newbie within Interquest Group, so I've only been here about 7 months now.
Okay, thank you, Lindsey.
And I'm Jenna Dyer. I'm the bid director, so I'm responsible for writing all tenders across the group, across all the group brands. I've been doing bids for about 15 years, and I've spent the last 10 years here at Interquest.
Oh, wow.
I'm Nicola. I'm the talent acquisition director for our Evolve business. I've been with Interquest for nearly 3 years, and I've worked in recruitment for 20 plus years, and I've been lucky to work in the UK, Australia, Asia, Europe, and across the world. But now I'm very happy here at Interquest.
Excellent. So between a lot of us, there's a lot of years of recruitment in this room, which is fantastic. And I think it's good that we're talking about the subject of flexible employment, especially actually at the levels that we're at, because when we first started our careers in recruitment, and there was no such thing really as flexible employment. And when we look at the workplace that we started off in compared to where we are now, I mean, they're polar worlds apart, aren't they?
Yeah.
And actually, it's true to say that our needs now, be that obviously not just for us, but everybody's needs are different to how they have been up until the last sort of couple of years. So I think for us, we're here to talk about the fact that we've got flexible working because we are mothers. In essence, so we've got a group of mothers together, so we try not to talk too much, as they say, the old stereotypical. But actually, flexible working is important for so many different people, where working mothers, fathers, anyone that looks after children, people that look after family members with health issues, elderly parents. It's a really big important thing now, and I think there's a big factor on the importance of making sure you've got a good work-life balance, and that flexibility sort of brings it in. So, to start off with, I just wanted to talk about childcare, because we are in the room because the reason, the connection between us guys with the flexible working is childcare. And I wanted to just talk about, to start off with, about our children and how that's made us have to have different flexible working, but also allow us to continue to have successful careers and not have to choose between the two, and I think that's really important. So I just wanted to start off really with just understanding, where you were in your career really when your little darlings come along. I mean, for myself, I was quite far into my career actually. My daughter was only 9 and I've been in recruitment for 24 years. So it's only been the last 9 years that it's been really essential for me to have some sort of flexibility. But it'd just be good to get a view around the room of what that's been like for you when that came in.
So for me, I was probably about 14 years into my career when I had my son, who is now 10. And I was in a sort of relatively senior role at the time. But then I had twins just shy of 3 years later, and then it was a bit like all bets are off. That changed the landscape slightly.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah, and for me, I think much like everyone here, the flexibility really becomes important when you have your baby, really, because then your priorities change overnight, don't you? And work doesn't feel as important as it was before, is it?
Yeah.
And then then you get past having petty flu in your hair at lunchtime, and then you do realise that you'd like your career back, and it's about finding someone who can offer that. And for me, actually, after I tried to go back to work after my daughter, I mean, this is like 11 years ago, 10 years ago when I tried to go back, and actually my employer at the time wouldn't let me come back with a flexible working arrangement.
And that's interesting, and we're going to come on to that in a second.
Okay.
Good point there.
Yes,
definitely.
Yeah, because I had a very similar situation. So I was 13 years into my career when I had my daughter, who's now 11, just turned 11. But I had quite a negative experience in that I wanted to go to 3 days. I had a job where I used to travel quite extensively, and I wanted to go to 3 days with just short haul travel to Europe. And actually, when I was kind of revving up to come back from maternity leave, not anything to do with me coming back from maternity leave, but structurally they wanted to place my role in Singapore, which would be full-time in Singapore, and a very, very different option to the one that I wanted in terms of 3 days and mainly UK based. So I was actually made redundant when my oldest daughter was 11 months old, which was very challenging at the time. But actually, to echo Jenna's point, at the time I was really quite delighted because the flexible option wasn't there for me. So actually the prospect of going back full time with a 12-month-old baby who didn't sleep, who didn't eat, who did anything was too much. Whereas if my employer at the time had been flexible, I'd have been really excited about going back to work, to have that variety, to get back to the person.
It's very disengaging when that happens, isn't it? I felt immediately disengaged.
And that's actually a really, really valid point, because I think when I look back now, I mean, I've had worked for a very long time for one particular company, and it was never really seen that you could do flexibility as going back as a working mum. And I wasn't there when I had my baby. I was at a different company, and actually I did go back 4 days a week, and they were pretty cool about it, if I'm honest with you. So I was quite lucky in that sense. But what I would say, that the flexibility was great because you could do it differently, but the transition and how you were supported to come back into it might not have been as where it needed to be. And I think when I look at the years that I've needed the flexibility massively, as Sophia's sort of been getting older, is actually why I've been here. And I must say that I've kind of had a really positive experience. That I've had to change my working pattern 2 or 3 times since I've been here.
Yes, as your child
my child's needs change. And I think the difference for that is that it's been a conversation. It's not, you've not felt anxious and nervous to have those conversations.
No,
to say, look,
deal breaker. This is what I want.
Exactly.
No, you can't have it. It's like, let's open that dialogue.
Yeah, and that I think is really, really important. And I think when I look back, I probably had only ever seen flexibility in the workplace with colleagues when they've been at a certain level, and equally when and I know this is very generally sweeping, but when they've worked for, I suppose, female bosses. Because that's where I've historically you saw that people were able to get a bit more flexibility, and I've only ever worked for male bosses here at Intercrest, and it's never been a challenge. It's never been a challenge to have a conversation around the flexibility needed. Around as my daughter's got older.
I'll echo that. I mean, my first kind of proper job back after having my 2 children, after I sort of contracted for a bit, was again contracting, but it was through a female boss who had 2 children of her own, and she was amazing. She was like, right, what can you do rather than what do I need? And she was sort of like, if you can do 3 days, that's amazing. At the time, I was sort of an hour commute away. She was like, well, what time can you drop the children off at school? I was like, well, 7:30. She's like, that's fine. So she was so accommodating. I said, look, I'm going to have to leave by 4 to miss the traffic and get back. And she was incredible. And in actual fact, I think because I'd just been working flexibly from home for a while, I was quite nervous about going back. So I was actually looking for reasons not to go back. Like, if she'd have said, oh, you have to be in 5 days, I'd have been like, well, no thanks, I can't do it. But she made it so easy that I got to the point where I was like, well, I can't turn this down. And, she was amazing. And that was,
and
really
I think that's
that
difference between having somebody that understands, and I think it's, important. It's not about, whether, I just mentioned there about working for male bosses here at Intercrest, but it's not about whether you work for a male boss or a female boss. It's just to do with attitude and understanding. And I think, when you work for an organisation that is forward thinking and understands that, your career is important, but your family life is even more important. Getting that balance right between the two, I think, is really, really interesting. I mean, you've had quite a different experience, didn't you? Because when you went back after your twins and everything, you had to kind of make quite a big change in your career, did you not?
Yeah, I did. Well, I mean, initially when I had my first son, I had actually had quite a positive experience going back to work, but I almost felt like I'd kind of earned it. I'd been there a long time, so they were a lot more open-minded about me coming back part-time. But it was generally a very positive experience, so that was great. But then some time after that, after I'd kind of embedded back in at work, I was made redundant. At that point, I still needed that flexibility. So I decided to kind of set up by myself and did my own recruitment business for a while, which again went really well. But as most people know, having your own business and the time and the effort and the hours you've got to put in
stressful.
is really hard. So when I knew I was pregnant with twins, it was like, oh, how am I going to do this? So when I had the twins, I had to take a bit of time out, because then the cost of potentially 3 under 3 of childcare is just crazy. And I think as a country, it's very difficult for anyone to be sort of in that situation.
Definitely.
Really.
If you haven't got mums and dads helping you, literally,
exactly.
you're
Not everyone has that.
It's not even worth going to work.
But that's the point, though, isn't it? The point is, if you've got an employer that can be flexible around it, so you don't have to pay up that level of childcare, you're not then having to choose between your career and the children. You can have both, but I think if you haven't got an employer that's flexible like that, you are going to have to make a decision.
You were talking about that long ago, and you were in that situation where you had to make that choice.
Well, I always felt like I had to make a choice at that point between having my family or having a career, and I almost accepted that I would probably never get back to the level that I was at one point, because I had 3 children. And
that's
so when
right,
I did
which
sort
is
of
wrong, because you've got all that experience and knowledge and perspective that
but
is just so
And
valuable.
if you learn how to multitask, this is when you're a mum.
Time management.
That's so true though. But I kind of just accepted that might not be an option for me. So when the girls were at an age where I could kind of put them into childcare, or they were starting school, that kind of thing, and preschool, I then sort of tentatively dipped my toe back in and thought, right, well, what can I get that's going to suit me locally? And it meant taking a more junior job, but it was still sort of related to what I was doing. It was human resources and that kind of thing, and it was part-time. And that's kind of how I got back into the market, into work again, and kind of progressed up slowly from there. But immediately you kind of feel like your options for looking around at job opportunities is just that much more limited.
Really limited.
Which is sad, and I really think that's a really not a good place to be. I mean, it's 2022, you shouldn't have to choose between the two. There's a lot of options out there, and actually I think if you give people the right amount of flexibility, you'll get more from them, because the dedication and everything's there. So we talk about flexibility. Flexibility means different things to different people, right? So, you can look at people that have got flexible working hours throughout the day, working patterns, only working sort of certain days of the week. I mean, for me, flexibility is about the fact that I can split the day out to go and do the school runs, right? And flexibility to me means the world, right? For me, it will be the difference between whether I would work for an organisation at this point in my career with my child being her age or not. And I think, for me, what does that mean? It means just having an employer that is open-minded to understanding that everybody's lives are different. They've all got different needs from it. However, it doesn't mean to say that they can't deliver the same outputs, but it just means as an employer you need to give them different levels of care and different levels of understanding about where they are in their life. What does that mean to you, Lindsey, for example, when you talk about flexibility?
So for me, the key thing is it's almost the little things, but they make a huge difference. So it's things like knowing if I need to go and take half an hour to do the school run and bring the kids home when they finish school, that you're not going to have someone watching the minutes till you get back, and they're going to trust you to just catch up on whatever you've missed and whatever you need to do and manage your own diary kind of accordingly. It's little things like that to me which mean a huge difference. And you don't get that in every environment, unfortunately. So that's why it's quite key.
I think it's about being, outcome and task driven. So, it's kind of like, if I think about my working pattern, you get up early, you get yourself ready, you get the kids ready. So you might log on at about sort of 7:30 because you check your emails, scour through. Then you have to do the school run, and then you'll get back. But you've already probably done sort of, half an hour, 45 minutes worth of work. Then you're back into it. So flexibility for me is being able to have your, it's about being outcome driven. So in that day, you need to achieve X, Y, Z. Does it really matter whether you do that between 8:30 and 5:30? No, as long as you get that outcome achieved. So it might be that you do it from 7:30 to 8:15, and then you do it from 8:45 to whatever, and then you have to scooch up at 5:15 to pick up the kids. You get back at 6, and then you might work till 6 to 7 to make sure that everything that you've set out to achieve in that day is achieved. And I think, at Interquest, you definitely get that flexibility, because as long as you're achieving what you need to achieve, it doesn't actually really matter, in what pattern you do that, as long as within that day you've got everything achieved that you want to achieve, and not just from your manager or company point of view, But you know, us working mums are really hard on ourselves, and you always have that slight feeling that you've got to prove yourself. It's always like, oh, I've got to prove myself, I've got to be that much better, because I don't want someone turning around and go, oh, they've got to pick up the kids, they, you know, bless them, they don't have time. You know, you've always got that slight kind of, I don't know, not paranoia is the wrong word, but you've got that slight feeling that I've got to be a bit better than the rest of you, because I need to prove
that is
to you what I'm doing.
That is our self-drive. That's what we put us on ourselves.
It's not coming from the company.
Certainly here, I've never been made to feel like that, but I just think it's who you are as an individual. You're that kind of driven person that you want to prove that it doesn't matter whatever you're doing.
And maybe that's why we're really suited to flexible working, because equally it doesn't suit everybody, does it? So
you've got to be quite motivated yourself.
You do have to be quite motivated. You're talking about, you know, in the context of full-time hours, isn't it? Taking time out of the day as you need to. My flexible working arrangement is a little bit different because I actually do reduced hours. So I'm like a school hours person. And again, you kind of do feel still now, when you meet someone new, you do have to be like, oh, I work school hours, and you still, you know, again, I think again that's probably coming from us, but
that's coming from you, though.
It's coming from me. I would say the same thing, but equally, you know, it's a shorter working week for me, and you know, I've changed that. When I started here, I did. My daughter was really young. I did 4 full days, and then she went to my mum and dad a lot, and spent time with her. I went to mum and dad. And then basically as she's got older, she went to school. I changed, instead of doing 4 full days, I did 5 shorter days, which meant I could essentially do the school run. It worked. It meant I could do the school runs and just work flat out in between.
And it's the same as what Nicola was saying though, is because at the end of the day we're quite lucky in the sense that our jobs are very result driven. Because we work in recruitment, regardless of whether you're recruiting or you're managing teams or you're doing bids. It's the output and the results that take place. But I do think it's quite important. Not if you don't work in a job that is very result driven, and it's, you know, the different sort of aspects. Like, it's not to do with, you know, you having to prove the results. It's the trust element to it. If you work with someone, you should trust that you're hiring an adult that's going to come in, and if they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. And I think that's the when you employ someone, the moment you put that offer on the table, it is a contract of trust, that I trust that you're going to do your job, and that you should trust that I'm going to manage you in a correct way that works for you. Not for everyone, it's not blanket management.
Do you think we've got that level of trust and that real flexibility in our roles because we've been here a longer time?
No, I think to be honest, I think it's different things really. I think there's an element of time there, and I don't want it to be like, oh, we're all sat at director and top level here, to be that's the reason that we got what it is. I think it's to do with how you conduct yourself. If you can prove to your managers that, you know, you go into an organisation and you are very driven to achieve the results that you say you're going to deliver, you're very focused, and the time and the hours that you do have to do the job, it's heads down, get it done. You still have fun, obviously. I mean, I start doing nothing but laugh, but we get our jobs done, right? We get our jobs done and we deliver good results and high level of results. And if, you know, even when we deliver the results, we all still sit there and think, oh, we could have done better, because that's who we are. So I think it's about the drive. But I don't think it should be about a length of service. But that does bring me on to a question that I've got in a minute, actually, which is very nicely flowed there, Jenna. You're a good anchor lady. I like it.
Nice segue, Jenna.
Yes, like that.
Thanks, ladies.
I mean, the one that I want to get to before the point I'm going to make about that is about what value you add onto it. You know, so I think, I honestly believe, you know, yes, I'm in a situation where I have been in, you know, my industry for a long time and what have you, I've got to the level I am, but you get approached all the time about new jobs, and someone can come to me and say, you know, I can offer you this, you can got all of this, got all of that. The bit they're missing is the bit that is most important to me at this moment in time, is the flexibility and the autonomy and the trust, right? And I don't actually think, this is only me talking personally, you can't stick a monetary value on it. And when people turn around and say, oh no, we're quite an inflexible employer, I always think, yeah, are you though? Yeah, are you truly a flexible employer? Because right now here, within the group, I get trusted to do whatever I need to do. The outcomes, they know I'm going to do the job, and you get kind of, you know, you're allowed. Obviously, you've got to, you know, explain what you're doing with people, but whatever you need, you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, you can't place a value on it.
Well,
you know, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about that.
No, I totally agree. I think, you know, that value of flexibility and actually doing it rather than just saying it. You know what I mean? We interview people all the time, bring people into the business, and they all want flexible working. When you actually talk through what Interquest does and what we do and what our values are and how task orientated we are on that level of trust, they're like, oh wow, you actually really do it rather than just talk about it. And I think, you know, that is invaluable in terms of, you know, what we're able to offer. And I think that helps us attract the right talent as well. Because, you know, one of the behaviours I look for when I'm interviewing people, and it's regardless of age actually, someone could be, you know, really very junior in their age and career, but you always look for that maturity and, you know, people being a grown-up, do you know what I mean? And they can be 21, 22, but it's those behaviours that they're demonstrating. They're actually taking themselves seriously, they're taking their career seriously, you know, they could be trusted to get on with it, and that's the kind of behaviours that we want to instill, because that's who we are as a group.
I think that's, I totally agree, and that's to do with morals and values, right?
Absolutely.
You know, you're I personally, I'm a bit of an old school lady. I think that you're only, you know, as good as your morals and your values, right? And, you know, there are obviously times as you're growing up, there's some of them get flexed a little bit, but however, you know, you can only judge yourself by your own morals and values. And if you come in, what we always do in people that join the group is that we trust that when they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. But they've got to also trust that when we say we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And it's about sort of demonstrating that really through the behaviours and how you treat people.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've obviously been, you know, you've got to, you know, director of bids. There's not many directors of bids within our industry anymore, so you're kind of flying the flag a bit now, mate. You know, but for you, obviously, I mean, I know you very well, and I know your little one, and our kids are good friends. But you know, would you have, if you look back now, if you didn't have had that level of flexibility, would you have been here? You know?
No, for me that was everything. When I joined here, I joined for flexibility. So I think since COVID, the flexibility thing has become much more high profile now. And I think some employers confuse flexibility with working from home. Flexibility is not just home work.
It's not.
It's
not
a
at all.
different thing. And often when I get headhunted, it will be like, oh, you can have full remote working. Well, remote working does not mean flexible work.
No, it doesn't. So you're working in a different place.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I joined a long time ago, and 10 years ago, I was lucky enough to be offered that flexibility within my role, as I said, doing 4 days and then 3 days. I've always worked on an official part-time basis, largely from home, and that has really suited me. And it suited me. What's great is that the company has been able to accommodate my changing needs for flexibility as my child has got older, and now I'm in a situation where I'm working school hours. Amelia, my daughter, is older now, so she's just gone off to high school. So actually now, in the context of my flexible working pattern, I've actually got a little bit of time for myself, which is like unheard of, isn't it? So again, I met, once she's settled, and I said to my boss, in the new year, I might look at my pattern again. So again, it's just having that ability to flex work to your life, because ultimately we go to work for the people who we love the most.
Well, this is it, and it's the power to not feel like you're afraid to have those conversations, right? So you just said, I've talked to my boss and said next year I'm going to talk to you about how I might want it to look different. That's how it should be. It shouldn't be that you're sat there waiting and scared to ask an employer about the fact that you want to do something different.
It's just not the culture here.
It's very flexible.
Very flexible.
I mean, Lindsey, you've been there for what, 4 months now? Is it 4 or 5 months?
7 months.
Oh my god! That's gone well quick. Really quick actually, but that's obviously because we're having fun.
Absolutely. Time flies when you're having fun.
But when we first had the conversation about sort of your career and just genuine, we wouldn't even talk about a job here, we just had a genuine conversation, didn't we?
I'll be honest, I hadn't even thought about leaving for that very reason, because I just thought it would be too difficult to find something that meets my needs in terms of flexibility. And it's only when I spoke to you that I was like, actually, there is a company that I could actually do more of a job that I enjoy, earn some good money, and actually have that flexibility as well. So it's it's something I'd be very nervous about in the future. I'd have to, we work in recruitment, we see so many jobs, and they think by advertising something as hybrid, they're being really flexible. It's not just about that.
No, not at all.
It's about much more than that, and flexibility looks different for every individual, by its very nature.
Yes. I remember when I first spoke to you on Teams, and we were talking, and your face always looked a little bit like nervous to say, I need to work from home, and I've got 3 kids, and I need to apologise. And I want, and the challenge that I've got is that I would ideally only work 4 days a week, and I was like, okay. And I remember you being a bit like, what? I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. And it was just, it's refreshing, for you. Obviously, the look on your face is like you hadn't had the conversation with someone previously to say that's all right.
Well, I didn't think it was an option for me, to be honest. So, but it just shows you how many companies out there are kind of missing a trick, because there's probably lots more individuals that were like me that have all this experience, but are very hesitant about exploring the market because they just think they're going to be closed down.
The option isn't out there. It's like, well, you know, I'd love to go back to work. I'd love to go back to work for 4 days a week or 5 days a week if there was flexibility, but it's not out there, so I won't look. And you know, that's a massive talent pool of experienced kind of, you know, really kind of talented people who isn't being tapped into because companies aren't as progressive as, you know, Interquest would be in terms of looking at flexibility. Like, I work full time, but when I joined Interquest, I was 4 days a week. And if I didn't have that true flexibility, I couldn't physically work 5 days a week. But I couldn't. You know, I've got 2 children, they're school age, you know, life's busy. And I don't know if I had to be in the office 5 days a week, how I would do it without looking at additional childcare. And, you know, people do that and that's absolutely fine, but it's never been for me to have that additional.
Because then you're going to lose your priorities.
Because then I lose I lose the time I have with the children.
Yeah,
so
you're getting worse, right? I mean, this is the thing.
Exactly. There's no reason why I can't drop my kids off at school and pick them up, you know, and do my job around that if it's outcome driven. And obviously there are days that you can't because you're in London or you've got meetings or whatever, and that's also fine. But you know, if I didn't have the flexibility, there's no way I could be full time.
Yeah. And I think also it's true to say that here within the group, that flexibility is not just extended to, you know, working mums. It could be any reason. As I mentioned, we've got people that look after elderly people, people that've got, you know, partners that need health reasons. Sometimes people only need a bit of flexibility for a certain amount of time while they're dealing with something, and then we've got working dads. Everyone's treated very fairly and they can get the same thing.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. We're talking here about, you know, in terms of the way that I've spoken and we've all spoken about flexibility in terms of, you know, our role as parents and, you know, being able to prioritise our child's needs as long as our sort of what we'd like for our own careers. But actually I think when Interquest has been most flexible to me, and maybe you might agree, Julie, is when I've had things going on in my personal life, like I had quite serious health problems myself, and my people in my family have had the same. You know, we've been managing difficult. We've managed to, you know, we know each other. We've both been in the company through difficult times for us personally. And that was when the company bent over backwards in terms of flexibility.
And do you know what? You really don't forget it, because I was only here for a very short period of time before I needed a lot of flexibility for a very, very personal, tragic
and nobody
situation.
asked you about that.
No one even asked and didn't question it. They literally said, "What do you need? Let us know. We'll sort it out."
Do what you need to
100%. And you know what? Over all the years I've been here, I will never forget that. And that's what keeps me very, very loyal to the group, because of things like that. But I think one of the things that we've all sort of touched on it in various points, but my last sort of thing to talk about today really is about when should flexibility be given, right? Because we've talked about the fact that we got flexibility quite late into our careers. We've been in the groups quite well. Actually, a couple of, you know, 2 of you here have got flexibility right from the beginning, like Nick and Lindsey, whereas Jenna and I had been here for a bit longer before we then needed the sort of flexibility. But actually, you know, there is a sort of a bit of a myth around you need to be in a company for, you know, quite a while to get to a certain position before flexibility should be allowed. Whereas I personally don't think that should be the truth. I think that it should be, if you're going down a true robust recruitment process on an individual and you have assessed that person is right for the job, they're going to deliver you the results, they're showing the right cultural fit, morals, values, everything else goes with it, you should be able to give flexibility right from day one.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because we've just gone through, as you know, a period of recruiting very junior people, so maybe fresh graduates, people who are very early on in their career. And whilst, you know, we're looking for people who demonstrate their behaviours of trust, maturity, it's like, who are you going to learn from if you're not in the office? And I'm not advocating 5 days a week. I think that's not necessary whatsoever. But I think for a junior hire, I think they get a lot out of being in the office. Not 5 days a week, but maybe for 2 or 3 days a week where everyone is in together, because there's a buzz, there's a hub. And whilst Teams is amazing, you don't get that anecdotal learning, because you might be sat at home, you've been in the job for 3 months, you kind of know what you're doing, you've already spoken to your team leader 3 times that day about X, Y, Z, you're like, well, I'm not calling them again. And you're basically sitting there thinking, oh God, I've not got a clue how to do this. In the office, you turn around to the next person next to you and you get that information. Well, you just overhear a senior person and you're like, oh, I must do it that way. So I'm a massive advocate of flexibility at whatever level, but I think you get more out of being in the office, not 5 days a week, but 2 or 3 days a week at a junior level. And also,
the junior guys kind of want it as well.
Yeah,
Do you think
but I
that's
think what you're saying though is not that us as an employer don't want to give it to you. We're just saying for your own benefit and for the benefit of your learning and the benefit of you being able to have the support that you need. We would rather you be around people.
And I have to
it's
say,
not a lack of trust, it's your own...
And it's been a while, but I was 22, 23 once, and I certainly wouldn't want to be sat at home in my parents' house in my bedroom. I would want to be in the office.
We were talking about that
Going out for
yesterday.
Thursday night drinks, getting dressed
I was
up.
actually talking about that with my boss yesterday, because I said, all these people who have joined during the pandemic, you do get loads of flexibility, hybrid working, not to be confused, but there is an element of flexibility that you give to someone automatically when you allow hybrid working, isn't it? And I was talking to my boss and I said, it's funny, isn't it? Because like when we were there, when we were the age of the junior recruits that you're talking about, everyone was in the office 5 days a week. It wasn't like it wasn't anything. You just didn't know anything else. Everyone came into the office 5 days a week, isn't it? And my boss said, it's weird, isn't it? Because you kind of feel a bit resentful about that now.
I don't know, I don't feel resentful about it. I kind of feel sorry a little bit.
I've said exactly the same thing, just like what Nick was saying. Like, essentially, you're like, we had a great time.
Yeah,
you have a brilliant, when you're young and in the office, it's a vibe, isn't it? You have a great time.
Very social.
So, we're at a different phase in our personal and professional
but do you know what?
lives.
I mean, if you're talking like generalised though, I mean, that's us in recruitment where it's sales, right? So we're all very social people. We like the buzz being around other people, bouncing off other people, and the banter that goes around and everything else. But I just, when you hear like friends and family and they're talking about their roles and they're in, and it's different sort of industries. And then when they try to seek flexible working, as I say, not hybrid working, but flexible working from an employer initially, quite often they get told, well, come in and after the first sort of 6 to 12 months we can look at it then. Well, actually, I don't know whether that's the right thing to do, because you're straight away sort of almost saying to that person,
you've got to prove yourself first.
we don't trust you yet. And I think if you don't trust them, don't employ them.
I think you're right.
I think times have changed quite a lot, and I think prior to COVID, it was something that people were scared to ask for. Whereas what I appreciate now is that it's opened the conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's not uncommon now for you to talk to a candidate that goes, I'm really interested, but this is what I need. And actually, historically, that would have been something. People wouldn't have been as open to that. Whereas now I think they are.
No, we love that. Like when we talk to candidates all the time, it's first things like, right, what are the key factors for you in this next move? And they will always talk about different things, and a lot of it is to do not necessarily. Actually, to be honest, I would say that the majority of people are not necessarily asking for flexible work; they're asking for hybrid working. Right?
I do think there's a big difference.
That's now like the new norm, right? Flexible working though is when you talk to someone, it's all you always still get the same tone in their voice, and they go, well, the problem is, right, I've got kids or I've got this, and I'm like, it's not a problem, stop saying it's a problem. But people automatically feel they've got to apologise about wanting to need flexible working, and I think they need to kind of knock that out. Because
this isn't the case at Interquest at all, but it's not so long ago that if you were looking for a part-time job, you would apply for a full-time job until the point where they really liked you, and then you would have to have that awkward conversation about, well, actually, that's great that you think I'm brave,
but that's something that would have put me off historically. Whereas I worked for a female boss recently who was of the mindset, I think you should assume every job could be done at perhaps a 0.8 FTE and then take the conversation from there depending on where it goes. And I just thought that was a really good way of looking at it, because it immediately makes you think about that flexibility and actually what's the essentials that you have to keep and what are the things that you can mix within the team to give more flexibility.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think when you're looking at a team, there is people also say sometimes, not heard it here, but when you hear it and generally talking, and obviously when you work in recruitment, everyone that you ever speak to ever wants to talk to you about jobs, right? It's just this, and they're like, oh, my daughter can help you get a job. I'm like, I don't do like gardening and that, but we have those sort of conversations. Is that that they always kind of feel like, well, I've got someone on my team that does flexible working, or I don't want to do that because then what the rest of the team going to be. If you work for a good bunch of people, right, it doesn't matter, because you've all got your outputs that you need to do. And I think if there are times where things creep into the day that you're not there, or the times that you're not there, the beauty of having a team is like having another. I mean, I heard someone say the other day, "Oh, work family, there's no such thing." You create your own family, right? So who's to tell you? Who's to tell you what your family is? You know, family doesn't have to be blood. It's about the people that you care about around you that you're doing anything for.
That adds value to your life.
So if, you know, I'm off in a week's time and Lindsay's looking after my work, that's fine. If Lindsay's not in on a Friday because she doesn't work Fridays and you pick something up, there's no question of it. You just do it. It's just what you do to help each other out. You know,
work family feeds back to the conversation we're having earlier about values. You know, for example, in my team today, we've just promoted someone from being a trainee to being an executive, and they're absolutely delighted. And he said to me, quote, "I really feel part of the family now."
I love that.
He said, "I feel part of the Interquest family," and I didn't prompt that conversation.
Yeah.
He said, off his own back, "I really feel part of the Interquest family now." And you can see that in the way he behaves, you know, the values he shows, and his performance, because he feels part of something that he really feels valued by, which obviously increases productivity and performance.
And I think that's so important, and I think it's really important to make people, even if you work 1 day a week, 2 days, 3 times, 4, 5 days a week different, we are all in it together.
Yes.
And as a team, we achieve greater results.
Yeah.
And I think if we can start thinking, if all of our industry or across, you know, just the, you know, the world in general in terms of how you look at people when you hire them for talent, start thinking like that, and you'll get better talent, and you'll stop narrowing down your talent pool, and you will bring more skills and more dedication to your teams. And I think that will drive better results. So ladies, look, thank you so much. We've been talking for nearly an hour, which actually for us is a very small amount of time, I might add. I think it's been a really interesting debate, and I don't think this is where the debate's going to end. I think we're going to talk more about it. And I think in future will be another podcast that will come around different demographics, talking about flexible working, not all just as working mums, but different demographics across the group. But thank you so much for your time and your input. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.